Howdy Hive Scum, and welcome back to, I think, part 2 now in a new 4-part series where I go through all of the gangs and give an overview of all the gangs in these 2 books, Gangs of the Underhive, and then after this one, Gangs of the Outlands. Now, I totally overshot myself in part 1 doing all 6 house gangs, lost my voice in the process and ran out of time completely, so we're going to do the last 3 gangs in this book, which are the Palanite Enforcers, followed by Venators, and of course the Corpse Grinders as well. Now, by the time that this video goes live, you should have these books, hopefully, if you've bought them, but if not, never fear, I am here to give you the overview on everything. Once again, thank you to Little Blue Dragons for supplying these books so that I can make these videos as well. Go check out Little Blue Dragons on Instagram, or if you're in North Sydney, go shopping there too. Now, kicking things off with Palanite Enforcers, this one is a bit of an awkward one because I've seen quite a few of you in the comments who are fairly new to Necromunda, and Palanite Enforcers were the most recently updated gang in the last edition of the rules. So before we knew that we were going to get a new rule set with Necromunda Warhammer Skirmish 2026, Palanite Enforcers were the most recent ones to get a glow up, and boy did they get a glow up. They got loads of new stuff, they got haunts, they got all sorts of cool stuff, and most recently they got a new book as well. Now, if you went out and bought that new book and all the new stuff, you'll probably be feeling a little bit sour about all this because that book is already, unfortunately, no good. So you'll have to go and get yourself this one now. But it's just the way of it, unfortunately. That's just how things move and progress. And it sucks sometimes when you are the last one into a game thinking that everything's hunky-dory and then all of a sudden the rules are invalid. It is what it is, though. There's still a really good gang to play. All of the models are still very much valid. All of the loadouts are valid. The only thing that's changed are the rules, right? So it is what it is. But things are still fairly good and fairly close to how they were before in the way that they feel and the way that they operate. So, Palanite Enforcers then. They have a gang special rule like all of the other gangs have, and this one reads as follows: well drilled. And this is really cool and really thematic if you ask me. Basically, Palanite Enforcers are trained to operate together and coordinate their fire. All active Palanite Enforcers may perform the group activation as a free action. Okay, so normally a group activation can be done by anyone now in this edition of the game, and it is an action to do it. It's a single action to do it. Now it is a free action for all Palanite Enforcers. What that means is anybody can group activate if they pass the required leadership check, of course, for free. This is really tactically very fun and very savvy. Of course, you're still going to have to rely on those leadership checks, which are mostly pretty good, by the way. We'll get into that in a second. But I think this could actually be one of the better gang rule-specific mechanics. Now, in terms of primary skill access across the gang, mostly it is shooting with a little bit of savant and some combat in there as well. But shooting is definitely the main sort of area where we focus on our primary skills with an Enforcer gang. Now let's have a look at the individual fighters in a Palanite Enforcer gang here. The Enforcer Captain comes in at 130 credits, so he is more expensive than some of the other leaders so far in this book. He's got 3 wounds, 3 attacks, and is pretty good on the mental stats as well with a whopping leadership of 9. So I think one of the highest leaderships there as well. His cool and intelligence, however, are only 7, the willpower 8 there as well. Starting XP is a 61, and just so you know, his save is a 5+, which is the same as all of the other leaders so far that we've seen. The Enforcer Sergeant is a little bit cheaper, and this guy is the Palanite Sergeant, not to be confused with the Subjugator that we're going to look at in a second, because you've got 2 different types of champions here. The Enforcer Sergeant is 90 credits, and he is more the sort of shooting type. His weapon skill is a 4+, so distinctly average in close combat. However, he does have that ballistic skill 3+. Other than that, though, he's pretty standard. He does have 2 attacks, though, which is nice, even though it's offset by the average weapon skill. He's got a 5+ save as well, and decent enough mental stats with an intelligence of 6. So Copper's not too smart so far. On the flip side of that, though, we have the slightly more beefy Enforcer Subjugator Sergeant, who is 5 credits more than the guy that we just talked about. This guy has a 4+ save. So he's got 2 attacks, 2 wounds. Everything else is the same except he has 1 less initiative. So his initiative is a 3 as opposed to initiative 4, by the way. He's 5 credits more, but he has a 4+ save. And his weapon skill and ballistic skill are swapped around. So he's got a weapon skill of 3+ and a ballistic skill of 4+. So generally speaking, the Enforcer Sergeant is geared towards shooting with his primary shooting access as well, and the slightly higher ballistic skill, and the Subjugator Sergeant is geared towards more close combat. Of course, you don't have to run them that way. That's just the kind of suggested build just based on the stats that you've got there. Now, the Enforcer Patrol Officer is your general ganger here. He is your ganger mook, but he's also a specialist. So these are the guys that you give the specializations to, whether you want them to be a medic, a sniper, a brawler, etc. They're 40 credits, which is nice and cheap, and they've got a 6+ save, so no sort of extra armor bonus that we might have thought we'd get for Enforcers, unfortunately. Just the standard 6+ save that you get on other gangers, but 40 credits is pretty good. The mental stats, not great, however, all 6s across the board, and I think pretty much the stats are the same as a Cawdor ganger. So interesting thoughts there, but the same, I think, across the board there. I might want to check that later. Then we've got the Enforcer Subjugator Patrol Officer, who is your Subjugator variant, so the Riot Squad variant of your average ganger. These guys are 60 credits, so they are 20 credits more than the Patrolman. And what that means is they're still a specialist. However, they do have special rules in here in that they can only pick 3 of the 8 specializations. They cannot be anything other than gunners, brawlers, and medics. Those are the only specializations you can have on a Subjugator. Fair enough, really. Now, the difference and what you get for that 20 credits extra is, of course, the save. The save is a 5+ there. They also get 2 attacks as opposed to 1. Other than that, though, they are very, very similar with an initiative 4. So not bad there. I'm not sure if that is a misprint, but again, 60 credits as opposed to 40 credits. You know, you're paying for the save and the attacks there. Nothing else, everything else is exactly the same. The Juve, or should I say prospect, Juve is not a word we use anymore. The Enforcer Rookie is 20 credits. Nice and cheap. They're the same price as a Bone Picker and, you know, pretty crap as you'd expect with 5s on all the mental stats there. Only 1 wound, 1 attack, but initiative 4 and a 6+ save. So, you know, it's a fine prospect, should I say. You know, 5+ weapon skill, 5+ ballistic skill, and movement 6, by the way. So they are faster than the rest of your gang. However, this is new. We have the Enforcer Haunt, which was previously a hanger-on in the last part of the game, and I think most people saw the Enforcer Haunt, they thought, that's awesome, I'll take it anyway, even though it is a hanger-on. This, however, is now part of your gang. So the Enforcer Haunts are part of your gang. You can have as many of them as you want. They count as a prospect, which means that you can have an entire gang made of just Haunts if you wish. You could have a leader and about 7 Haunts maybe. They are 50 credits, which is really cheap. Nice and cheap, so you could actually have an absolute ton of these guys. They are terrible otherwise, though. I mean, they've got a movement 6, weapon skill, ballistic skill 5+, strength, toughness 3, wounds 1, initiative 3, and attacks 1. So very average prospect stats, basically. But they are prospects. However, they get a 6+ save, a 5+ on leadership and cool, a 7 on willpower, which is important for a reason that we're going to talk about in a second, and intelligence 5. So basically, they are an Enforcer Rookie with a higher willpower. That is it so far. However, they have the weird subtype in here as well. So what that means is that you can have them as a sanction weird, and they count as either a Psyrender, which is one type of weird, or a Bone Crusher, and there are models for each of these as well. Now, if they're a Psyrender, they get 1 free Psyrender weird power, and if they're a Bone Crusher, the same. So you get to pick one of the Bone Crusher weird powers, which we'll talk about in a second. It's worth mentioning as well that because these guys are actually part of your gang list, they can be equipped with heavy weapons if you wish. I mean, you wouldn't anyway, you just give them psychic powers, but if you really wanted to, you could have these guys running around with heavy flamers and stuff, plus weird powers. Food for thought there. Moving on to the hard case Cyber Mastiff, which we do now have plastic models for, by the way. They're 75 credits, and these are your Enforcer pet, and they're still pretty good, by the way. They are, you know, weapon skill 3+, which is better than average, toughness 4, better than average there as well. Still only 1 wound, but they are 2 attacks, and a save of 5+, by the way. So that is the only pet with a save of 5+ there. Other than that, though, the mental stats are terrible. As you can imagine, the intelligence is a 4. They've got a couple of special rules here as well, which are pretty cool. The first one is basically when they get taken out of action, they get to fight before they leave the actual board, which is pretty cool. And also they get the Loyal Protector rule as well, which means that you cannot perform a coup de grace action while this pet is in leash range at all, which is pretty good as well. I think it's the same as the Orlock Cyber Mastiff as well. But 75 credits for a toughness 4, save 5+, 2 attacks, weapon skill 3+, with 2 special rules. Probably the best pet that we've talked about so far, I think. We then got our Enforcer Sanctioner Pattern Automata as well. This guy is a whopping 235 credits, but he is your House Brute. Also available in plastic, I might add, so you don't have to go to Forge World for this guy. He is a big beast, as you can imagine. He's got Strength 4, Toughness 5, 3 wounds, 2 attacks, and lots of options on things like concussion cannons. We've got the choke gas grenades, stun grenades, the Sanction Pattern Man Catcher, among other things as well. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the Brute though, but yeah, he's still available and he's still alive and well. We've also got the Enforcer Tauros Venator. Now this is a vehicle and this one is 250 credits. Now what is different is this isn't a mount. It is a vehicle and it has its own profile. Its movement is 7, weapon skill is 5+, and ballistic skill is 4+. Strength is 4, toughness is 5, wounds 3, initiative 4, attacks 2, and save 4+. And they have mental stats that are pretty average across the board there as well. Now, it is armed with a Tauros concussion cannon and a Tauros hull. It also may replace its concussion cannon with a heavy stubber for 20 credits as well. And that is your first proper vehicle that we've got dedicated in here, outside of obviously the mounts, which we've seen, the cutter, the mauler and stuff like that. Weird that the mauler is a mount, but this isn't, but hey ho. In terms of the equipment and war gear that you get for a Palanite Enforcer gang, it's pretty broad. You get lots of stuff in here, particularly lots of shock weapons. We get some concussion weapons and lots of solid rounds, bolt guns, shotguns, things like that as well. No special rules on any of these things, but we've got wide access to all of this stuff, by the way. So lots and lots of cool stuff here. You can get dirt bikes on your Enforcers for 35 credits. Hard case Cyber Mastiff, like we spoke about a minute ago, pretty good there. We also get riot shields across the gang for 35 credits, as is the Vigilance Pattern shield as well, which is 45 credits and also available to absolutely anybody should you wish to. Riot shields, not bad. They've got parry and the shield rule in there. And for the Vigilance Pattern shield as well, they're strength +1. They've also got concussive 6+ and knockback 5+ as well, with parry and shield too. Interesting thing here is Magnicals are no longer free. You have to pay for Magnicals and they are 20 credits and they read as follows. You can restrain a fighter with a double action. So target an enemy fighter that is engaged with this fighter. The enemy fighter must make an agility test. So a 4+ for most people, except less for an Escher, 3+ typically, or do they just get to re-roll it? I can't remember here. If the test is failed, they have been locked in place and become subject to the webbed condition. So not quite as good as it was before. You know, it just means that the person gets stuck in the mud, they can't move anymore, and they get -1 to their ballistic skill. So it's interesting there, but you know, for 20 credits, are you going to take Magnicals anymore? Personally, no, but you know, I'm sure there's someone out there that can think of some shenanigans to use with them, particularly on things like Ogryns maybe. Lastly, onto the weird powers here. We get 3 different Psyrender powers. The Psyrender is a telepath, by the way. We get hallucinations, which is still really good. It's still one of the best ones. It turns you insane in exactly the same way as it did before. However, insanity is less harsh than it was. You always have a chance to not be insane at the end of your activation. So now it's not quite as harsh as a 1 in 3 chance of getting out of that insane condition. We've also got Terrify, which is a double as well, which I really like as well. And that one basically makes you suppressed because there's no longer a broken condition in the game anymore, which I do quite like, to be fair. And we've also got Mind Control as well, which makes a enemy fighter shoot a close target as well, one of their own fighters too. For the Bone Crusher though, we get the Crush, which is a free one, by the way, and you get to just destroy an obstacle, which is pretty cool. It doesn't target a fighter anymore, it is just an obstacle. We've also got Force Field, which is a single continuous effect that gives you a better save, an invulnerable save in fact, and also Force Blast as well, which is a free continuous effect, Force Blast, strength 2, knockback 3+ attack as well. So overall, I think Enforcers are in a really good space. They're pretty much the same before in that the gang doesn't have particularly good raw stats. The champions are a bit of a letdown in some ways because, like I said, the main champion, the patrolman champion, is only average weapon skill, and the subjugator is only average ballistic skill. But you know, with a mixture of both of those things, and with the ability to have a shit ton of haunts in there, I do think the gang is in a really good place. They've got a nice extensive house list. They have a dedicated vehicle, a good brute, and arguably one of the best pets in the game. So that's my overall thought on Enforcers. I'm sure there's some shenanigans you can do with building lists with these guys as well. And again, list building now is just more fun with this edition. I think there are so many more options, particularly with those specializations on your ganger types. And in this case, we have two different ganger types as well. On to my favorite gang, the Venators. Venators got an Apocrypha Necromunda release for the last edition of the game, which just blew the entire world of Necromunda and the community just out of its socks, basically. Everybody who read that document absolutely fell in love with Venators, myself included. I have played Venators ever since that came out. In fact, I played Venators ever since the beginning of Necromunda. If you don't know, Venators are a team of bounty hunters, pretty much, and they are a mixture of all sorts of fairly elite types of fighters. We have beastmen in there, we have squats in there, ogrins, rattlings, and all sorts of human types as well, that used to be members of gangs or are now just straight up bounty hunters. Venators allow for the biggest amount of storytelling, kit bashing, and just narrative focus in Necromunda, and they are still that way, and they have included them in this book, which I absolutely love. So hats off to Games Workshop for doing this. I was really worried that Venators and Outcasts were going to be gone. They are not. They are still here, they are alive and kicking, and they're still one of the best gangs in the game. Now, for the gang special rule, it is a little bit different here. If you take at least 3 fighters, enemy fighters, out of action in a game, you get an extra 20 credits. Pretty cool. Now, the way that skills work across the gang is the same as it was before as well, but if you don't know, you basically get to select your own skill sets from the available core skills. So what that means is your Venator Hunt leader gets to take 2 primary skill sets from any of them, and then a third and a fourth secondary skill set as well, and that's just what they'll use for the rest of their campaign. The champions and the specialist as well, similar, and the specialist gets 1 primary skill set and 2 and 3 secondary skill sets as well. So it's a little bit complex, but you get to choose basically how they develop and how they turn out later on in campaigns. Now, there are subtypes within this, like I mentioned earlier. We have Ogrins, which have the special rule that in addition to other skills, they get the Juggernaut skill, which is fantastic. They also get Rattlings as well, which means that when they roll a natural 1 to hit, they get to re-roll it on their ballistic skill checks, which is pretty cool, but only when they're performing an aimed shot, by the way. And they also get Sneaking as well, which means that the fighter always counts as being in a weapon's long range when counting cover, which is pretty cool. The other subtype is the Beastman, my absolute favorite. These guys, basically, their attacks characteristic is increased by 1 when they are injured. So when they're injured, they can't use their skills, but their attacks characteristic goes up by 1. The next thing to talk about is gang legacy. So if you're a human fighter or a squat fighter or an Ogren fighter, you get to use your gang legacy. So you get to, when you buy a Venator of whatever kind, if it's a human Venator, you get to choose from the house gangs. If it's an Ogren Venator, you can take equipment from the Ogren list. If it's a squat Venator, you get to take, squat list stuff. And of course, Rattlings and Beastmen don't have their own list. So other than that, you get to use access to the trading post, depending on the level or rank of the fighter in question. So we have lots and lots of options on different fighter types in a Venator gang, and that's kind of the point really. For your leader, your generic Venator leader, we have 130 credits, so definitely on the elite side, one of the more expensive ones. They have 4 different profiles for the generic leader, and the generic leader has, a profile that's very, very slow and quite fighty, with toughness 4, for example. They've all got 3 wounds, by the way, which is fantastic. Most of them got 2 attacks. One of them's got 3 attacks. So if you want a fast leader, you can. If you want an agile leader, you can. They all sort of gear towards different things, really, depending on what you fancy. However, you can also have an Ogren Hunt leader, which is 180 credits and just an absolute beefcake with strength, toughness 5, wounds 3, and 3 attacks. Movement 5 as well, weapon skill 3+. He is an absolute menace and really, really hard to put down in this version of the game, particularly in close combat. We've got the squat leader, who is toughness 4, of course, with 3 wounds. And we've also got the rattling leader as well, which is ballistic skill 3+, weapon skill 4+, strength toughness 2, but 3 wounds again, which is pretty cool. 2 attacks and 8s on all the mental stats. And then lastly, the Beastman leader, my favorite again, 145 credits, strength toughness 4, 3 wounds, 3 attacks, more if he's injured, and a weapon skill of 3+ as well, ballistic skill 4+. Now, all of the leaders here get trading post access for their starting equipment. They basically start with 5 TP. So they can use 5 trading points to select their gear, which means that you could spend 3 trading points on one weapon and then maybe 2 separate weapons worth 1 point each, for example. That's basically how it works with the leaders. And then the champions and so on, they go down in the amount of trading points and access they get to the trading post. Don't forget though, we still have access to their house lists depending on what gang legacy you go for. So you get full unfettered access to your gang legacy. However, if you want to take things from the trading post, you get a certain amount of points to spend. If you're a leader, it's 5. If you're a champion, a bit less. For the Venator champion, again, you get access to 4 different fighter profiles that are 100 credits, and these are your sort of human types generally. You get your Ogryn, Squat, Rattling, and Beastman as well. I'm not going to go into all the stats here because, again, this is just an overview, and I will do a full gang guide, when these guys maybe get a journal in the future as well, and that'll be a lot more in depth. Same thing for your gangers as well. Your house hunter is 45 credits and is a specialist, so again you can go with the 8 different disciplines there, your snipers, medics, etc., on top of the fact that we've got 8 different profiles for the types of for the types of fighters. So you can have a beastman medic ganger, you could have a rattling sniper, which works perfectly in the fluff as well. The options here are really, really limitless, and it just means that you've got so much potential for telling a real narrative story with your gang building. So I could talk for absolutely days about Venators on just how cool they are, but you really need to see for yourself just what the potential is with Venators, because you can really do anything now. And actually, the fact that you've got access to the specializations makes them even more customizable. I wouldn't recommend them as a starting gang for a lot of people because they are quite complex compared to other gangs in terms of at least how you build them anyway. They don't have to be. You can make them more simple and just take the human guys, for example. But Venators, absolutely still in this game, and still, I think, the most important and fun gang that there really can be. Corpse Grinders. When I say those 2 words, a lot of people who have been playing Necromunda for the last 9 years will shudder at the thought. Corpse Grinders have been one of the most oppressive and somewhat overpowered gangs, certainly in close combat in the last edition of the game, since they were first released. Now, I've always loved Corpse Grinder lore and fluff, and I personally really like the way they played. I think by the end of the last edition of Necromunda, they tend to have got sort of surpassed by some of the house gangs and some of the strong mechanics like gene smithing, and a lot of people figured out ways on how to counter Corpse Grinders, but they were still very much one of the better gangs, and they were very, very scary to face. They either won massive or lost massive, to be honest. They were very swingy and they were very one-dimensional, but I personally found them quite fun to play. They have been nerfed into next week on the page at least, and we're going to discuss how and why, because I think it did need to happen, but did it need to happen to this extent? Let's see. So for the gang special rule for Corpse Grinders, it's a bit of a weird one because it only actually does stuff in campaign play. It doesn't do anything in skirmish play, so there's no use for it in skirmish play, which is a bit of a shame really, but basically you get 1 extra XP for taking somebody out in a charge action. So it's really that simple. And it's a bit of a shame that you don't get anything for, skirmish play, I suppose. They don't get like +1 attack on the charge or anything like that. They just get 1 extra XP, which is nice in a campaign because you're going to want to make sure that you're going to try and take people out in close combat, which is where these guys excel. They are the close combat gang, really. So this just makes you want to do it even more, I suppose. There's more incentive to take people out in close combat, I suppose. In terms of skills, though, they get Brawn as their primary, but they also get quite a bit of combat as well, and a little bit of Savant in there too. But onto the fighter types, these guys have changed a fair bit. The Corpse Grinder Butcher, which is their leader, is still very much an absolute menace. He's 135 credits, and he's still a big, beefy pest. He's got a 5+ save, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, average initiative with only a 3 there though. He is, however, strength 4, so he's stronger than a Goliath all of the time, and he's also got weapon skill 3+ and a ballistic skill 4+ as well. His mental stats are pretty good with a cool and willpower of 8, a leadership of 8 as well, and an intelligence of 7 too. Now to begin with, he can take weapons and war gear from the Corpse Grinder list. However, from the trading post, he can only take close combat stuff, so he is a close combat fighter and he can't take any guns or anything anything from the trading post. I mean, you just wouldn't anyway because he's so good in close combat. But that's the long and short of it on the Corpse Grinder Butcher. The Corpse Grinder Cutter is your champion. He's only 80 credits though, which is a lot cheaper than some of the other champions in at 100, like the Enforcer and things like that. This guy's got a 5+ save. He's got 2 attacks, 2 wounds. Again, average initiative there, but weapon skill 3+ as well. And he, again, in the same way, can only take close combat weapons from the trading post as well. So no guns for your champion and no special rules for the cutter either. Your Corpse Grinder Skinner is your ganger here. He is a specialist as well, interestingly, and he's 35 credits, which is incredibly cheap for a ganger. He's only got 1 attack. He's got 1 wound. His initiative 4, though, which is a bit higher than the other 2, weirdly. And he's got weapon skill 4+. So he's very, very average. The movement on all 3 of these fighters is 5. And, you know, he also only gets close combat weapons from the trading post as well. The next fighter is your Corpse Grinder Initiate, and he's 20 credits, the same price as a Bone Picker. He is 6+ on his save. Otherwise, very, very average. Movement 5, weapon skill, ballistic skill 5, by the way, so no longer as good as he was before. Strength, toughness 3, wounds 1, initiative average on a 3, and fairly terrible mental stats with 5s on cool and leadership, things like that. Now, he has got a special rule here, which means that when you level up to 13 XP and you normally become a ganger, if you choose to become a ganger, you can only then turn into a Corpse Grinder Cult Skinner, which means that you can only take the close combat gear again, so you've got to get rid of all your shooty weapons. However, you can choose not to do that, and you can stay where you are and keep onto your shooting stuff. Does that make sense? But yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. Basically, as soon as you go up to the level where you would be a ganger, you can choose whether you can become a ganger or stay an initiate. Now, before we talk about, you know, all of the changes here, I'm just going to go through the last fighter because there is an extra fighter here, and this is your Brute. Yes, there is a Brute for Corpse Grinders, and I think this is the most exciting, at least most positive change for Corpse Grinders is the Chaos Spawn. 130 credits, random as stats. They are 3+ D3 on the movement, for example, and the mental stats are 4 leadership, 8 cool, 7 willpower, intelligence 5 as well. These guys, basically, when you hire one, you roll a d6 on a table and for each stat, and that is what your stat is. So, for example, if you roll low with a 1, you're going to end up with a really bad Chaos Spawn, but if you roll 6s, you're going to end up with a really good Chaos Spawn. When a Chaos Spawn is taken out of action, they are only out cold, which is fantastic, but, however, they are out of control, which means that in the post-battle, during the wrap-up step, if a Chaos Spawn took part in the battle, there is a chance they will escape. Their controller nominates up to 3 fighters from the gang who did not go out of action during the battle, roll a d6 for each fighter, and if at least one fighter rolls a 4+, the Chaos Spawn is restrained and remains with the gang. However, if you roll 3 under 4+, one of them goes into recovery. Sorry, the spawn goes into recovery, and one of those fighters rolls a 1. The Chaos Spawn lashes out, and they get a lasting injury on the lasting injury table. They come with warped appendages, and you know, they can't take any other weapons or war gear, of course, because they are a Chaos Spawn. So, before we go into the equipment and war gear on the sort of house list for Corpse Grinders, there are a few key changes that you'll notice there. So, firstly, there are no masks anymore. Masks, if you know about Corpse Grinders before, masks were a huge thing. The leader and champion, basically you couldn't shoot at them or fight them unless you passed a willpower check, which made them incredibly powerful. There were house rules that made that just line of sight only, but it was still really, really powerful. You had to counter them with templates most of the time, and not every gang had good access to those. Secondly, those masks stacked into their armor as well, and here they don't. All of those fighters have pretty average, in fact, very average armor as well, so the masks are well and truly gone. The effect of the masks for armor and for terrifying and fearsome are gone. The other thing is the omission of savagery skills. Of course, we don't have those at the moment, but I fully expect these guys will get their own journal at some point, and I imagine savagery skills and some other stuff will turn up for Corpse Grinders because they are a fun and fluffy gang. The biggest elephant in the room, though, is the Initiate lacking the Infiltrate. Now, they did start at 25 credits, I believe, with Infiltrate, average stats, slightly better than a Scummer, in fact, and access to all of the gear and some idea. The Initiates were the most oppressive and horrific thing about the Corpse Grinders in a way, because you could just give them all hand flamers, infiltrate in, and they were a real problem. And that was usually the bone of contention for most people playing Necromunda. Now, however, they are just prospects. They're still good, they're still cheap, but they are just crap prospects just like everyone else. And they're just going to have to just stick with it, I suppose. In terms of their house list, it is actually quite small, to be fair. The ranged weapons, they've only got auto pistols and stub guns. They've got flamers, hand flamers, and heavy flamers. I love the heavy flamer now, I really do. Harpoon launchers, the butcher's chain cleavers, and all the heavy chain cleavers and things that you get on your gangers and leaders and stuff. Fighting knives, two-handed axes, and a bunch of repurposed tools as well. A few grenades, and you can take, most importantly, dirt bikes on all of these guys too. In terms of those very, very scary weapons that we used to have, the heavy chain cleaver, or the paired heavy chain cleavers, they used to be the most scary weapons. They're still very scary. They are strength as user though, so you don't get the +2 strength. They're still -2 AP. There's still 2 lethality, and they are shred 6 up as well. The paired one is paired 2 as well. So not as good as they were before. The warped appendages you get on the Chaos Spawn, pretty nice though, with -1 AP, 2 lethality and parry. Boning swords, nowhere near as good as they were before. They've still got -2 AP, but they're only 1 lethality with parry as well. And the rotary flensing saw, my absolute favourite in the last edition, is now +2 strength, 2 AP and 2 lethality with heavy, shred 5+ and unwieldy. So it's a bit harder to use, but it certainly does hurt when it hits you. So there you go, Corpse Grinders, heavily nerfed but still fun. I think what is cool about this is that you could, in theory, take an entire gang of, or at least half your gang anyway, of just Chaos Spawn. I'm going to do this actually. I'm going to have a butcher. I'm going to have a bunch of initiates herding Chaos Spawn around. I just think that would be really cool. You know, and there's still some shenanigans you can do with them. They're still good in close combat, but the fact that close combat, it's now harder to kill stuff in close combat than it was before, and the fact that these guys aren't actually as good in close combat as they were before, you're not going to see many people playing Corpse Grinders anytime soon, I don't think, unless you're just playing for fun and fluff, and, you know, that's great. But they are going to struggle against some of the other gangs, and I actually think out of this book so far, they are the biggest loser, at least on the page anyway. I'd love to know what you think in the comments though. Let me know what you think about the Enforcers, the Venators, and the Corpse Grinders in this book, because, you know, I think Venator's a real winner still amazing, and Enforcers doing pretty well, I think, there as well with their haunts and stuff too. But again, I'd love to know what you think in the comments. Stay tuned for the next video as we break out the gangs of the Outlands. Hopefully I don't lose my voice or run out of time on this one as well. I'll be back real soon. Thanks for watching.